Hello, my name is Rick Houston, and welcome to the Scene Vault Podcast, your source for all things NASCAR history. Presented by Las Vegas Motor Speedway, America's racing showplace.
So with Robbie, when we started practicing at Nashville, to be honest with you, after like our second run, like I knew it was going to work with him. I know that you can get replaced any day. I know that as soon as in anything that's competitive where you kind of rest on your laurels, you don't try to get better, you don't keep studying, you don't keep trying to make your car faster, you don't try to get better as a driver, you don't try to make better pit. As soon as you start doing any of that stuff, I mean, you're gone. It was definitely the most exciting race of my life. Not a win bigger. Never had a win bigger than that ever, no matter what any of them were. Just because of, because without it, I'd never have any of the rest of them. So Dale Jr. and I moved up together. He won Texas, and I think he won an all-star race the week before. And I felt definitely a little urgency to win.
The day NASCAR and all of us associated in any way with NASCAR forget its past, that's the day we don't have any future.
Early 1990s, you were racing against this Robbie Reiser character several times a week, and from what he said, the two of you were basically You two were basically okay with each other. What do you remember about racing against John and Robbie back then?
Well, John and Robbie are way two different people. So John's like nicest guy I could ever meet, right? And Robbie was very, very competitive, very stubborn, very bullheaded, and I always pick on. I still do because he always cheat his cars up so bad. His bodies are always like super good looking. He'd always run this old Firebird with a nose cut way down low, and I'd give him a hard time because he'd show up for Artco races where they actually used templates, and he couldn't. They wouldn't let him compete a few times. But anyway, racing against Robbie, Slinger was kind of his place. He ran really well there. He ran really well at a lot of places. He ran well at Madison. So I'd say Madison and Slinger are probably the two tracks we raced against the most. I would say my first few years, we didn't really race against each other that much because he was a lot better. He was a lot faster than I was, a lot better than I was, and when I was kind of getting started. And then probably 93 is when I got running much better in late models, when I met Rick Kipley and he built us an engine, and all of a sudden we were fast. And 91, 92, first couple of years in late models, we weren't really very fast. We won a couple of races here or there, but really weren't very competitive on a consistent basis. So, but 93, 94, we certainly had some battles. We duked it out a little bit, for some wins at Slinger, for some wins at Madison, and I don't think he really cared for me really that much for those couple of years. But like he says, and he's right, he was kind of the, not really much older, but he was the more established kind of veteran, been doing it for a while, and I was kind of the young kid coming in, and being on both sides of that fence through my career. It's not fun being the older guy, and you kind of been doing that, and you get these young kids kind of come in and be, especially if their attitude's not exactly perfect.
So the two of you were okay with each other, but from what he said, your dads kind of clashed a little bit.
They clashed a couple times, but my dad, so my dad, to back up a little bit, my dad started racing when I was about 13. He was 45 or something, so he didn't start till much later, but he had three brothers, and they all raced at a little local short track at Jefferson. And finally, my dad, as he got older, decided to race it, and I worked on his car. So I was the only 13-year-old kid in the pit area who had to calm his father down constantly. So our relationship has always been a little bit backwards. So I was always calming him down. He was the one who'd want to get mad and do all that, and give him some credit. A lot of that was just to kind of protect me, right? It's kind of, you're his kid and he's trying to protect him and keep an eye on him and make sure nobody's taking advantage of you. But yeah, Dad would get pretty wound up.
So you made your first Busch Series start for Carl Wagner at Charlotte in the fall of '96. How long had you been working for him? Just that 1 year. Okay. I raced for Carl in '96. So I moved to North Carolina in '96 with a deal Carl put together with the idea of racing the Hooters Cup series at the time. Yeah. And a few all-pro races here or there. He said we're going to run some truck races, maybe run some Busch races, and not much of it really
came to fruition. We did run the whole Hooters Cup Series, ran some other late model races there. We ran pretty decent, and then we only ran that one Busch race. So we were sharing a building with Bobby Dotter, and he got a car together, and Carl, he was an interesting man, and we didn't have an engine to go there, and obviously Carl was an engine builder, famous engine builder, had tons of success, and he was going to send our engine down for me to run my first race. So it was a backup car of Daughters, and we're sitting there, and you had to go through tech on Wednesday back then, because I know you remember it well. You'd qualify, and then you'd run qualifying races, and there were 72 entries there. And I think they took 28 by time, and then they ran the qualifying race, took some there, and then you had a couple of provisionals or whatever.
So you had to run the hooligan race?
Yeah, so we got there to go through tech on Wednesday, and we didn't have an engine in the car. Carl didn't have an engine down there yet, so that was the start of our weekend. And
that's a problem.
Yeah, we got the engine there that night after we went through tech. We were pushing through tech with no engine, which was really bizarre to me. And we finally got the engine in it. We qualified 29th. We missed the 28 cut by one. And I think we finished I know Joe Nemechek won that hooligan race, and I think we finished second or third, maybe something like that. But we made the race, finished the race. It was a experience, to say the least. It was a lot for me. It was a very interesting race. I learned a lot that race. I learned a lot about people. I learned a lot about a lot of different things. I kind of had a crew chief at the time that was. He pretty much knew how to do everything. I didn't know anything because I was just a kid coming in, which he was right. But, I kept kind of telling him what the car was doing or asking for different things. He wouldn't do it because that's not how these cars work. And it was just it wasn't really a great experience, but it was a good experience as far as teaching me a lot and learning a lot.
Now, I did watch one video that you had done with Kyle Petty, and you were talking about a habit that Carl had and the way that you got him back. That's the only question that I want to copy from somebody else.
Yeah,
I want to hear that story.
So Kyle had that in video. I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I don't remember talking about that. What were we doing?
Where Carl would.
Yeah, I know that, but yeah. So Carl had a habit.
It was the coffee with Kyle deal.
Oh, the coffee with Kyle thing. Yeah. I remember that now. So Carl would have this, like, there's a few people I met in my life that would have this, as we all have as men probably, that have this bad habit of going wanting to, like, hit people in the crotch. So he'd walk by and he'd try to always give you, like, a nut slap as he'd walk by, for lack of a better way to put it. Sorry. He'd do it all the time, and I just didn't find it funny. First of all, it's painful. Second of all, it's weird, and it's just I just kind of got tired of it, And Carl was a man of few words. I never really got to know him very well. Like Robbie worked with him a lot and ran his engines forever. Up there, I never really ran his engines, so I never really got to know him. I don't know if you knew him at all, but just a very
I knew who.
Man of few words, and just very, very different characters. So. So anyway, we're at the race shop, that building that we shared with Bobby Dotter, and Carl was down, because he was from Wisconsin, and he came down and he was talking about something, and he went by and tried to whack me like he always does or whatever. So I was kind of ready for it, and he'd go in the bathroom. They had this big bathroom there, and he'd go disappear for a while to do his business or whatever. And there was a pretty good crack under the door. It was about that big, and he was in there, and I waited for a minute or two to make sure he was settled in, and I took a big hole, one of them whole big long things of those blackjack firecrackers, and I lit them and threw them under the door.
Lit him up.
And besides being in a loud concrete space, or a small concrete space that was very loud and very smoky, he was in there for quite some time after that, and when he came out, he did not look happy, and there was a lot of smoke. I mean, a lot of smoke out the door. And
was it like on the TV show where they're all black and their hair is singed?
No, it was more like, the old Cheech and Chong when they opened the van door. Yeah, it's just like just rolling out everywhere.
Yeah.
And but I never got slapped again by him, ever. That was it. I fixed the problem.
That is awesome. Now, that was 96 in May. And the following spring, in the spring of 97, you get a phone call from Robbie. And what do you remember about the phone call, and how surprised were you by that phone call?
Yeah, so So 96, the thing with Carl really didn't work out that great. Like we only ran that one Busch race. The truck stuff never happened. It just wasn't. We just really couldn't get it really off the ground. So I ended up moving back to Wisconsin and went to drive ASA cars for Jerry Gunderman, which had a lot of success with Scott Hansen and Ted Musgrave. A lot of guys drove for him. That Mark Martin had tons of success up there. Jimmy Fenning worked for Jerry. So I went back up there to work for him. And we went and ran a couple races early in the year, a couple ASA races, and I was going to run the whole ASA season and some other stuff. And we were down running an all-pro race at Rougemont. And Robbie called me up and said that, well, let me backtrack a little bit. The week or two before that, I believe it was, we were down here to race something else, and I just randomly stopped by their shop. I don't know why I stopped by because we weren't really friends or anything, but I stopped by, and he was really nice, showed us his whole shop. Walked around, looked at it and stuff, and talked to him a little bit. And I saw him in Las Vegas that spring. We were running a late model car for Gunderman in Las Vegas, and I actually had Robbie spot for me out there. I went and talked to him a little bit, and they were having some trouble with their driver, and they wrecked a couple of cars. So Robbie spotted for me in Vegas, and then so that would have been like maybe in March or something like that. So then maybe a month or so later, we were down racing at Rougemont, and that was after the Vegas thing. And then plus I stopped by his shop, and so I was kind of talked to him for the first time since he moved away, from racing up there, which was probably, I don't know what year he moved down here, probably 95, if I had to guess, 90, something like that.
Yeah, 93, 94,
I feel like it was,
somewhere in there.
Yeah.
94, 95.
It was at least 94, it was 94, 95. And so yeah, he called me. He said, "Hey, we'd like you to, on your way home, because we'd drive where I was driving back to Wisconsin. We'd like you to stop by the shop and just kind of want to talk to you about something and whatever." And so
now, when you dropped by the shop earlier, had you had any kind of?
No, nothing about driving for nothing like that. No, nothing. So after the race that night, I drove down there and met. I think pretty sure my dad was with me, and we went down and met John and Robbie. And talked to him, all the cars were wrecked in the shop, and he's like, "Hey, we got to make a driver change. We just can't get this to work." And, they had several drivers on the list, and I think Robbie was the only one who really wanted me to drive it. And so I said, "Yeah, if you'd like to drive it, we'd love to have you come down, but, we need a driver next weekend in Nashville." I think it was the next weekend. And I looked around and every car was wrecked. I'm like, "Well, do you have any cars?" "Oh, yeah. There's one at the body shop." He assured me, right? So he's like, "Well, sit in this car, see if everything fits." Yeah. And then you jump at the opportunity to do anything. I mean, I wasn't really, young anymore. I think I was probably 20, 24 maybe at the time, maybe a little bit older. And I was like, I'm going to get this chance pretty soon. You're not going to get it because they were already getting younger and younger. Gordon was young, and Elliott Sadler came in younger, and like all these guys were coming in there. And so, yeah, it fits great. And so I went back to Wisconsin, and, it was rather risky because, I mean, they weren't running real great, and they were wrecking a lot. But I never had the chance before and knew I'd never have a chance at like a functioning team to do it if I never took the first chance. I was never going to get the other one, right? So I just decided to do that. So it was hard. I went up there and told Jerry that I was going to go down and drive that Busch car. And I mean, I just started racing for him, so that was a really hard conversation to have. And just packed everything up in my little Chevy Cavalier and drove south. And actually, I met him in Nashville race that weekend, and then got my stuff moved down in the next couple of weeks, and been down here ever since.
That was Matt's version of how he wound up with Robbie Reiser. Here's Robbie's version of how Matt came to drive for him. So Matt Kenseth gets in the car at Nashville.
Let's go back and talk about how Matt Kenseth got in the car.
Well, I think this is how did that come about?
Well, when we had the problem on Saturday night, we went back to the motel, and we all went out to eat, and the whole team was eating, and we were talking about what we're going to do and how we're going to do this, and we needed to find a driver, and everybody kind of put some names out there, and Kathy Virtue put some names out there, and we were sitting at the table, and I said to my dad, a lot of the names that have been brought out, people have done this already, and we're trying to build this team to go win races and become a force down here. We got to look for somebody that's going to be able to take us there. I said, I hate to say this, but if we run the team and we hire Matt Kenseth to drive the car, I think Matt can do it. And my dad was completely silent at the table, completely silent. And And everybody had a conversation, and when supper was over, my dad came to me and said, "Robbie, do you really feel that that's what you want to do?" And I said, "Well, Dad, I really feel like I'd like to drive it myself, but that ain't the right thing for where our team is right now.
Really?
You know, our team would be best if we could team up and have somebody that we have complete confidence in and go race." And he says, "Well, I can't believe I'm saying this, but if that's what you want to do, then you go do that. You're going to have to get a hold of him and see if he'll drive the car." And
had you ever talked to him about
no. And what's really funny is
there was no grand master plan?
No. So we got back. We did all our stuff at Bristol, and we came back and got home. And on Sunday morning, I was going to try to get a hold of Matt. So I call his house, and I get a hold of his. I think at that time was his mom, and she told me he was racing in Rougemont, North Carolina, in a late model race. So I called over to Rougemont to the track and left a message that I needed Matt to give me a call, and I gave him my name and number and told him I'd like him to have me call as soon as he could. Well, it took a little while, and all of a sudden Matt calls. He says, "Robbie, what do you need?" Yeah. And we got talking, and he's like, "Are you?" I told him what I wanted to do, and he was sort of like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yes, this is what I want to do." And at that time, he had just accepted an ASA ride for Jerry Gunderman up in Wisconsin, and I think he might have ran a race or two. I can't remember how it was, but I think at that time he really wanted to do what we were doing and wanted to come try this. And this was an opportunity. And I mean, him and his dad finished racing up at Rougemont, and they drove down that night, and we fit him in a car and made the deal, and he said he was going to go back and talk to Jerry about his ASA ride, and he would meet me at Nashville. That's how it all started.
So you called him the week after Bristol, or you
No,
called
I called him the day we raced on Bristol on Saturday. I called him on Sunday morning.
Did you really?
Yeah, because we had to be at Nashville on Thursday. Going through tech.
Oh yeah.
So I had to get him fitted in the car. So he was at Rougemont. So he came and sat in the car, and we fitted him up and got his seat and everything the way he wanted it. And then we got ready to go to Nashville.
Now, was this a one race deal or substitute deal? You knew this was going to be permanent, right?
Yeah.
Now, was Tim hurt that bad, or was he just?
Tim was hurt bad enough that he wasn't going to drive the car anymore.
So I have this very vivid image of you at Nashville, your first race with Robbie. Nobody basically down here knew the name Matt Kenseth, but you qualified third. Then you went to Talladega, I guess the next race, finished seventh. Were you surprised by how quickly you found success here?
Yes, I mean, there's a few things that pop into my mind, and it kind of goes back to that Charlotte thing. So, I mean, not talk bad about anybody. The crew chief I was working with in Charlotte when I drove Carl's car, we put spring in the right rear and it made the car tighter. He said, like, that's impossible. It's impossible it made the car tighter. I'm like, I'm telling you it did. It was impossible. So, like, I had no confidence, right? Like, telling you you're stupid and just don't, basically telling you you're stupid. That's no possible way that did that. You're wrong. You're doing it. I'm like, okay. And so with Robbie, when we started practicing at Nashville, to be honest with you, after, like, our second run, like, I knew it was going to work with him. Now, I can't say I knew that I was going to be there that long. I knew I was going to win races, knew we were going to move the Cup together, or win a championship. Like, I couldn't have ever dreamed that.
Right.
But I knew it was going to be a good relationship because him being a driver, even if I would come in, because a lot of people would always tell you that transition between late models and Busch cars. These are big, heavy cars with radial tires, and those are really little light cars with normal tires. Like, they'd always give you this stuff. So basically, you'd kind of hear like, okay, well, does that mean my feedback's not good? Well, you can't get it to feel like that. It has to be like this. And they try to get that in your head where you couldn't just be yourself. So with Robbie, I could go in there and drive it, and I was like, I don't know, I think it feels like this. And he's like, okay, well, what if we try this? Sometimes this works in these cars. And we have this conversation back and forth as equals, and he's drove before, so so he knew what I was feeling. And, most of the time we'd try what he wanted to try, and then we'd try what I wanted to try, and we'd figure out what felt better, and we kind of would go through the journey together.
Right.
It wasn't like him standing there, hey, I've been down here for 3 years, this is your first year down there, you don't know what you're talking about with these cars. That's not going to work. We can't do that. It was never like that. And that's why it worked so well, is because, right from the beginning, it was a partnership. We were both in it together, and we're both pulling on the same end of the string and trying to figure out how to make it work.
Was there ever any kidding around about racing against each other back home?
Yeah, there was. I don't know if there was necessarily immediately, but there was. So I'm sure Robbie told you, since I think he's been here, that he still has the highest finish of any driver for Reiser Enterprise at Nashville. At Fairgrounds. So he reminded me of that. So we qualified third that day. We were running really well, and Jeff Purvis spun me out, and we didn't hit anything. And I can't remember where we came back and finished. I feel like we finished 10th or 11th or something like that.
Yeah.
And but we ran pretty well. It was overall a success, and Talladega was a success. So we had a decent start. It wasn't always super smooth. There was one time where I was thinking he might get rid of me. But other than that, it was pretty smooth. We went through a 3 or 4 week stretch. That wasn't very good. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but overall it was great.
Was there a specific point when you were like, okay, I can do this, I can race at this level, or was that something that developed over time?
Well, that's a tough question to answer, because I never really, to be 100% honest, I mean, even to the time I retired, although when I finally did, I mean, I just felt like I couldn't do it anymore, after the year driving a 42 car with no practice, and I just didn't run well. And I always said if I couldn't run well, I wasn't going to do it. And so I never really felt comfortable ever my whole career. Like, I've never felt sat there and been like, oh yeah, I can do this. Oh yeah, I'm, whatever. I just never felt like that, because I know that you can get replaced any day. I know that as soon as in anything that's competitive, where you kind of rest on your laurels, you don't try to get better, you don't keep studying, you don't keep trying to make your car faster, you don't try to get better as a driver, you don't try to make better pit. As soon as you start doing any of that stuff, I mean, you're gone. You're fading out, no matter what sport it is, no matter what business it is. I mean, anything in life, if you're not always trying to get better, you're going to get worse, So I just never really felt that comfortable. I never in a million years would have dreamed I would ever made it to this level. And once I got there, I certainly wasn't going to be like, oh, this is great, I made it to Winston Cup racing, and just not try anymore. You'd be gone in a hurry. So I never really got that comfort, honestly.
At some point, you and Mark Martin started talking. What were those earliest conversations like? Were they just racer to racer, or was there actually talk about somehow actually getting hooked up with Roush Racing? Yeah,
I mean both. Mark was very direct, and
really,
it was very, very direct, and it was real quick. So, as you remember, the drivers' meetings used to be much different than they ended up being through the years. They used to just be in a very little building. It was just drivers and the couple of powers to be from NASCAR and telling you the rules and all that kind of stuff. And I guess crew chief. So I remember it clear as day. So it was actually Talladega, my second start with Risers. I was sitting at the drivers meeting, and Mark was running the race and came walking straight in and grabbed my hand and introduced himself and shook my head, and he's like, "Hey man, I've been watching you. You're awesome." And he started talking to me, and it was like very very overwhelming. And I can't remember if it was exactly that day, but it wasn't long after that where he's like, "Hey man, we're gonna help you. We need to do something for you. I gotta get you at Roush Racing. I gotta get you to meet Jack." And then there was a point there that year. It all happened that first year. Where I ended up signing a contract with Roush Racing, kind of development type contract. I go with Mark and Jimmy testing. He would try to help us with some information. Robbie and I with the cars try to help a little bit. Different setup stuff. He give us hints and ideas, little bits here and there, and really started getting involved. Really right away. Really didn't take long. I went to Jack and vouched for me, even though he didn't even really know me. And I went to Dover in the spring of that year and went and met Jack in a trailer and met him for the first time and talked to him. And really, that's when our relationship started. So I guess my second, well, been a third start ever. My second start for Risers was when I first met Mark.
I had no idea it was that early.
Yeah.
Now, was there ever any Ford versus Chevy issues because obviously Roush is Ford and you guys were running Chevys at the time?
There wasn't, because it was all Reiser Enterprise stuff. They had a little bit of a relationship with Chevy, and even my first couple of years driving for Roush, we still drove Chevys at Robbie's side. Still drove his Busch cars, Chevys, and nobody really seemed to have an issue with it then.
Okay, all right. So I can remember having lunch with you and Robbie during that off season between 97 and 98, and at that point, sponsorship was really up in the air. How big of a concern was that for you? Were you looking at other options? Were you talking to Mark about what you could maybe do with Roush if Robbie's deal didn't work out, or were you all in with Robbie?
Well, no, I mean, I was all in, with Robbie, just trying to keep doing this thing together, which we did do it all together until, really until he stopped crew chiefing, and, from there. So, I mean, really our whole careers, we did that together. So ironically, Roush was the one getting us our sponsor. So we Kraft left after that year, and then Roush, Jeff Smith and the marketing group and everything had a sponsor for us, or we thought we had a sponsor for us, and we were kind of ready for that, and it kind of fell apart, at the last minute. So I remember it was tough on Robbie. I remember Robbie and his dad and I flying to New York to meet with people and try to scrape some money up, and couldn't get it. And most things wouldn't fall through. And it was just, then there was just a million sponsors. There's all different sponsors. There's obviously much smaller, but so we travel and go see people, and but through that time, I did have a couple offers from other car owners, but I didn't even entertain them. I mean, I'd tell Robbie about every one of them, but I didn't even entertain them. I'm like, we're going to make this work. I remember driving to Daytona and him being. We were driving in a van Daytona, and he was all depressed. He's like, "You need to go take one of these other jobs. You're stupid. We're not. Yeah. We might not even have enough money to race after Daytona. Like, if you don't go take one of these other jobs, you're not going to get a chance. You just need to go take it. I'm like, I'm not taking it. We're going to make it work." And so we got through Daytona on a one race deal. I remember we took the car out of there. So much the sports changed. The NASCAR was so great, they let us take the car out of there and go paint it across the street and put a sponsor on there for one race. And then we went to Rockingham the next week and didn't have a sponsor still, and didn't really think we were going to be able to finish the season, even though it was only a second race. And we put Lycos on there to just kind of thank him for Daytona. They didn't pay us a dime for that race. We ended up winning that race. It was our first win together. First NASCAR win for any of us on the team, any kind of NASCAR win together. And they ended up coming on for the whole year after that race. That kind of saved us and got us enough funding to get through the rest of the year.
So Rockingham, what do you remember about those last few laps with Tony Stewart?
Yeah, it was funny. So I just, I remember running them down. We were pretty good on a long run, and there's so many great drivers in that race. Mark Martin was in that race, and Jeff Burton. I think Dale Jarrett was even in it. And Tony was going to get his first win for Gibbs, and I remember catching with like 3 or 4 to go, and I got off at 2, and I don't even know what I did, but I kind of ran into the side of him a little bit, and I got loose. I was like, man, that was stupid. Just kind of hyped up. It's hard to explain, but you get this feeling when you actually see the leader, and you might have a chance to win any race. Like you get this, so I was probably just a little overexcited, and I kind of regathered it up, and then. Honestly, I didn't think I was going to beat him, and we had a lap car. I thought I had to run on him again with a couple to go, and there was a lap car in our way. And then I got into 3, and there was that. It's a little hard to explain for if somebody hasn't drove Rockingham, but there's a spot entering 3. There's a little bump, and there's the line down. Similar to Atlanta 3 and 4, how it used to be. And if you grab the line, it would like hook the car. And then with the Busch cars, they didn't have a ton of power, and back then compared to what they are now, they're not super fast. But when you got it hooked, as soon as it would hook like that, you could just mat it, and then the left rear would stay on the line too, and it would be really fast. And if you missed that line, it was usually 2/10 slower. Like it just kind of wore out right there where most people would run. But if you could get the lefts on that fresher stuff, it was fast. And I just remember getting in that corner and. Didn't think I was going to get to him, and he went in and missed the line by about 3 or 4 inches. And I hooked that line. When I hooked it, I floored it. and he was going up the hill just a little bit, and you had all those waves, and still to this day, everybody except for Joe Gibbs will maybe he'll argue it because he was still mad about it. But like, I don't even know that we hit. Like, I mean, it was just those days where you could get close to people, and then especially offset left to get the air off him and get a little loose. So I got the run toward him. I mean, it was only just it was like a foot at a time. It was barely, and as soon as I got almost to him, he got a little bit looser and slid up the track, and I had enough momentum right after the lift to beat him to the finish. So it was. Definitely the most exciting race of my life. Not a win bigger. Never had a win bigger than that ever, no matter what any of them were. Just because because without it, I'd never have any of the rest of them. It's just, that was it. It was an exciting finish. It was, you beat one of the best to ever drive a race car at the end of the day. I didn't have any sponsor on the car. We didn't know if we were going to continue to race. Everybody's standing there in the pits with hodgepodge uniforms and no sponsors on our uniforms. And, everybody that worked at the shop. I think
that was the last plain uniform ever in Victory Lane.
Everybody, everybody working at the shop had a job to do over the wall, everybody, including Robbie. So it was just, it was really interesting. There's only like 7 of us or 6 of us that worked at the shop, and we went there and won that race against some of the best. And it was just an awesome feeling, and it was a lot of fun.
That Rockingham Busch Series win was big for Matt, but let me tell you, it was also just as big, if not bigger, for Robbie Reiser. He needed the money.
Headed to Rockingham, and at that time, the car was still painted in the red and blue colors, and we qualified 27th. Oh boy, that's not good. All right, so we changed the whole car around. We worked on the car. Back then, you had a little more practice, so you could do things on the car, and got the car working pretty good in the last practice, and Matt was somewhat happy with it. And we were changing a few things for the race, and so we're starting 27th, and we're getting ready to go out. And my dad says to me, "Robbie, what do you want to do? What do you want to do with those Lycos sponsorship? Should I put the decals on the car, or shouldn't I?" I said, "Well, Dad, I don't know. Nobody else is talking to us about sponsorship. Let's put Lycos on it, and let's see what happens here." So we put the Lycos stickers on right before we rolled it through tech.
Even though you had no money?
We had no money from them.
Okay.
But we were trying to, they had talked to us about maybe doing some more races, and we thought, let's say a thank you for Daytona, and let's put that on and see what happens. Well, we start running this race, and we're running pretty good. We start working our way up in the top 10, and all of a sudden, 15 laps to go, we're running second, and we're running Stewart down. Tony Stewart's leading. And 5 laps ago, they were running into each other, back and forth, trying to get the lead. And so they go down in the 4 on the last lap, or down in the 3 on the last lap, and Matt shoves Tony up the racetrack, and Matt drives underneath him, and we win the race. And we're in Reiser Enterprise blue polos, black jeans. The way we were pitting the car, we didn't have any extra people. There was nothing. We win this race. It's unbelievable.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable. I get goosebumps just thinking about that race because it was so exciting. If I look at one race in everything that we did, that's the one race that changed the world, because that changed our life for where it was going to head. And so we win that race. I remember Jimmy Fennick running out of the garage area and high-fiving all of us as we ran into Victory Lane, and that was when they had Victory Lane on that little ramp, and you ran up there, and it was really exciting. And then, so now we win the race. We get a lot of publicity. We get an opportunity to go back to the bank, go back to the tire guy, go back to the engine guy, pay everybody a little bit of money. Yeah. Now we're going to go to Vegas.
As that season went on, it became pretty clear that the championship was going to come down to you and Dale Jr. And there was so much attention on him. Was there ever a sense that maybe was a good thing for you, because while he had to deal with all those kinds of distractions, basically all you had to do was race? Or did you have the sense that it was a David versus Goliath situation?
Well, I have never, made excuses or anything like that, but certainly, the funding and the amount of testing they did, and certainly they had some advantages, but can't make any excuses. Same for everybody when you get to the track. And I felt like there was a lot of times we ran as competitive as him, but there's a lot of times he just spanked our tail. There were some tracks that he was just really, really good at. He was really good at. I could list the tracks. There's a few that we were really good at that we were definitely better, noticeably better. We'd go to Dover. I would even say Charlotte, some of the bigger tracks. But, man, he was so good at, like, a lot of those flatter short tracks, like Gateway and Richmond and places like that. Like, I couldn't hold a candle to him, and he would beat us at all those places. So yeah, it was fun. And I think Jeff Green finished second in points that year. Him and I became really good friends, enjoyed racing against him as well. But the junior stuff, I don't know. I mean, I'd be lying if I'd say there wasn't times in the first 3 or 4 years of our careers paralleling where maybe I wasn't, a little bit envious, of maybe some of the recognition he got when I thought there was times where we ran, just as good as he did. But yet another hand, I also witnessed a lot of times with him where it was a huge hassle. And I think he would have gladly traded places and gone places and not be recognized and be able to go to sit down and eat dinner or something, So it was really interesting to watch. Dale Jr. always had a lot of pressure on him. He always handled it, really well, being him. And it wasn't easy. Like, I think a lot of people just think it was easy, and it really wasn't. He worked for everything he got, and it was really hard to be in his dad's shadow. And I always that was one place I wasn't envious of. That's one thing I wouldn't have wanted, and that was I think that was tougher for him to do than a lot of people think.
You did run Bill Elliott's Cup car at Dover in late 1998, and you finished sixth. And that seemed, from the outside looking in, that seemed to be the race that really put you on a lot of people's Cup radar. Like, this guy is the real deal. Did you pick up on driving a Cup car that quickly? Or, again, was there more to it than that?
Beginner's luck.
Come on.
So how I say that, there's never been a bigger win than Rockingham. I would say I can't recall a race I had more fun in than that first race at Dover.
Really?
I mean, it was just, it was so much fun. There was no pressure to do it. I mean, the circumstances weren't great, obviously, with Bill's father dying. But, man, Mike Beam is great. Joe Garrone was great. Lauren Renier spotting. Lauren was a great spotter. Had fun with him on the radio. We just had, there was just no pressure. We won the Busch race the day before in Robbie's car, and we're just kind of hauling the mail, and we kind of brought some of that stuff over there, a little bit, that setup stuff. And, the car was fast. I got to race against all kind of my heroes I'd only watch on TV. I mean, man, I got to race against, Jeff and Mark and, Earnhardt and Dale Jarrett and Rusty and all these guys I only watched on TV, and both of Labontes and all these. It was just crazy to even be on the track with them. It felt like a dream, really. So then, as good as we ran, we honestly, just off speed, should have finished third. We ran Mark and Jeff Gordon and Mark both had the field covered. Other than that, we could have ran with them. And I got behind a little bit on the last pit stop and couldn't get by Rusty. He did not want me to pass him at all, and he was making it really, 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 really hard on me. And I didn't think I was going to be able to get by him without wrecking one of us or both of us. And I just couldn't get back by him. But most of the day we ran, somewhere in that area. And if we stacked everybody up, it felt like we're a third place car. But never drove anything with that much horsepower, and you could just drive the track a lot different. And it was one of my favorite tracks anyway, and just had a really good time. I mean, I kind of came into that race with a lot of confidence, winning the day before, and like I said, there wasn't really pressure. I wasn't supposed to be there. We didn't have any concrete plans to go Cup racing in the future. We hoped to, but we didn't have anything put together. So with all that, it just there was no pressure, and it was just fun.
So the year 2000, you do move up to Cup with Jack. And you go to Charlotte, and you win your first Cup race. What do you remember about that night?
Well, I remember a few things. So Dale Jr. and I moved up together. He won Texas, and I think he won an all-star race the week before. And I felt definitely a little urgency to win, just because he already won at Texas. And, I was like, man, we gotta get going here. And so anyway,
was that self-inflicted, or was that?
It was self-inflicted.
Okay.
But the 600, Dale Jr. had the field covered. I mean, he had us all covered, and that was in the day where I know they'd hate it when you say this, but there was a period of a couple of years there where you would get. Get in trouble for wording it like this, but you get a bad set of tires for no other way of putting it. So you just get a set for it, and you don't know why. You couldn't find it. That was before there was spring rating and doing all that stuff. You had no idea why, but you'd be out running, whatever. You'd be at Charlotte running 32 flats. You put a set of tires on, and it would be so loose you couldn't hold on. You'd be running almost 33 flats. Like, it was just like they were that different, and you just didn't have any idea. And Dale Jr.'s last set was one of those. So he had everybody dominated, and I remember he put on his last set of tires and just went straight backwards. And Bobby was leading the race and ran Bobby down at the end, and it was a really long race. We had a big rain delay in the middle. I mean, it was forever. And I remember running Bobby down. I was like, dang, man, I'm actually going to get there, And back then, if you got there, you could pass somebody. It wasn't like how it got to be later with all the aero dependence and everything. I mean, if you got there, you're going to get around them. And I was like, man, I'm actually going to get here, And caught him with, I don't know, dozen or so laps to go or something like that, and got around and was able to win that first race. So that was a pretty exciting night.
From the outside looking in, again, there seemed to always be teams at Roush Racing that had good equipment, and there was a set of teams that didn't seem to have the best of equipment. How aware of that were you? Did you get involved in protecting your turf, so to speak, or was that something you just tried to stay out of?
I'm gonna say that's not true at all.
Okay.
Like I'm gonna say that from all the years that I was at Roush, everybody had equal opportunity. There was nobody that got better equipment than somebody else. There was people that thought they didn't get as good equipment as somebody else, but it was never that way. Now when you had that many teams, I mean, maybe there was an engine that had 4 more horsepower or 6 more horsepower, and maybe Mark would get that, and the bottom guy wouldn't, or maybe when you first designed a new car, they'd go in order of maybe points. So maybe there was times there was a little bit of lag time, but I touched on it a little bit, in my Hall of Fame stuff. But the best thing about driving for Jack is he'd give you whatever you wanted, but you better be careful. I watched a driver get himself fired there before just by making demands what he'd need to win. Jack would just give up. He's like, I remember sitting in a meeting. It's like, if I had a drop snout car, I go win races immediately. If I had this, I go, I'm like, ooh, be careful, because I already knew Jack. Like, I had him sort of figured out, and he's like, okay. And then he'd look at the guy, he's like, get him on order today. Like, he'd get you whatever you needed. But if you were going to say that's what you needed and you're going to run better, and that you had to make a case for having it, and you better do what, there better be results along with it, because he wasn't about just wasting money and throwing it out the window. But on the other hand, I remember all those years, like, if we really thought there was something that was better and we did the research and really needed it, he never, ever, ever once asked what it cost. He'd be like, okay, if that's going to make you better, go ahead and get it, and he'd get it for you. So, other thing I was just thinking about yesterday with the 75 list or whatever is, like, look how many Roush Racing drivers are on there. I mean, that says something about Jack right there. When you see Jeff Burton on there, Greg Biffle's on there, obviously Mark Martin is on there, like Kurt Busch is on there. I mean, that tells you a lot about Jack right there, and that's 5 different teams right there. Carl Edwards is on there. I might even end up on there. So I mean, that puts 6 drivers on there just in the era, in the last 20 years or whatever. I mean, that's pretty impressive. I don't know if there's any other owner that has that. I mean, maybe Rick, I guess, but other than that, I don't know if there's another owner that has that many drivers that are on that list.